Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing? You sure? Yeah. 110%? All right. It is a pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. My name is Tony Waller, Senior Director of Corporate Affairs for Walmart, living in lovely Bentonville, Arkansas. Hey, why y'all laughing? Thank you. It really is always a pleasure being here to reacquaint myself with good people, meet new people, and really engage into some real great conversation. I always look forward to being here because it's just awesome to get together with good people to kind of refresh. You know, sometimes it gets real rough out there. It gets real rough, and you always have to wonder, like, oh man, should I continue doing what I'm doing? Maybe I just need to go ahead and give myself a little bed and breakfast, somewhere, wear shorts every day, and all I gotta do is worry about fixing breakfast and cleaning, making up beds and just go to the beach or something like that, right? Every day. But we have to come to the reality that sometimes that's not what it's meant for us to do. So a couple of people came up to me this afternoon and said, okay, Tony, what's the story you're going to tell us today? Lord, I should have never told the story the first time I had a chance to meet with the U.S. Bank Chambers. But because now there's always the pressure on, in fact, one gentleman came to me and said, have you spoken already? And I'm like, no. Oh, great. I was like, man, more pressure on me. So I'll tell you this little bitty thing. Last week was my birthday. Last Wednesday, May 11th, I turned 54. And this week has really as of that week, it's really been some real reflecting time. Because I had to come to terms with the fact that at the end of the day, I'm not trying to be, fatalist or morbid or anything like that, but at the end of the day, I have less days ahead of me than I had behind me. The chances that I live another 54 years is pretty slim, statistically speaking. 44 years, kind of slim. 34 years, perhaps, because of, if I look at my family history, perhaps I could do another 34, 34. 9 out of 10, probably another 24. Right? So I just got a little bit of time left, right? And so you start thinking about, am I doing what I need to be doing to make the kinds of differences that I should be making? And will I leave this earth knowing that I've done what I had to do to make this a better place for humanity? And so I'm going through all of this right now. And one of the things that kind of came to mind was having a conversation again with my mother. My mom and I in those conversations. So, my mother used to always say, baby, do you know you are meant to be great? But you're not the only one who's meant to be great. See, we were all created to be great. And then she would say, this is when you were born, you were given two things that nobody can take away from you. You were given a name, and you were given an assignment that only you can accomplish. And then she said, your greatness will be determined on the fact of whether or not you take on the assignment that has been given to you. And so she would always ask, what is your assignment? What's your assignment? Not what your job is, okay? Not what you're doing, but what is your assignment? And so my challenge to you here, my friends, leaders, is to really figure out and embrace what your assignment is and carry it out. Because you're meant to do amazing, great things. You were already created to do that. I was talking to a doctor just a few minutes ago. We were just talking about that fact. And she was telling me how she's a breast cancer survivor and she's doing this workaround, which is totally awesome. I need y'all to meet her. Lady right here, doctor. Y'all get to meet her. It is awesome what she's doing. But we talked about, she said, you know what, but I'm a doctor, right? I'm a doctor, but there's been something that's been put inside of me all this time, and I've been kind of struggling with it. I've noticed what I'm supposed to be doing, but I kind of do some other stuff, but it's still drawing me to do it. It's your assignment, baby. You gotta do it. It's not a choice. Now, sometimes, we don't like our assignments sometimes. We want somebody else's assignment, but that's not the point. You were given something to do that only you can accomplish. And so to all you folks in here, your businesses and the chambers that you're running, it has to do more than that. It has to do with this larger assignment that you are meant to carry out. So I'm asking you all to carry out your assignment. Figure out what that is. Honestly, you already know what it is. Stop fighting your assignment and just do it. Make something really great happen. So with that, I'm going to be quiet and let's get to the matter at hand. I'm really excited about this plenary session that's about to take place this afternoon. It's going to be a great conversation, and kudos to the U.S. Black Chambers during this school of management this year, because the conversations have been on point, on time, just really insightful, really great information. So to Ron and David and Heather and all the rest of the staff who've done an amazing job, kudos to you. This conversation this afternoon is going to be just even better, and I know it's going to be all the way live. So I just ask y'all to put on your seat belts and hold on and be ready to absorb some really great stuff. And I hope that what it does is just gets us thinking and reflecting, and more importantly, that we leave here taking what we learned and do something with it. Without further ado, I will turn this over to the man himself. The man himself, Mr. Roland Martin. Let me help you.
All right, folks, how we doing? Good. All right, are we on? There we go. So how we doing? Good. All right, great. I want to get right to it. I just want to bring up our three panelists so we can begin this conversation and spur all kinds of discussion. First up is Van Moody, pastor of the Worship Center Christian Church. John Weaver, pastor of Greater Mount Nebo AME Church. That's it. Also, Alexis A. Thomas, Pilgrim Rest Baptist Church. All right, then. My wife was here, she would ask, where are all the sisters who are pastors? She's only been ordained 23 years, so I would ask that question. So, how are you doing? So let's get started. First and foremost, the last 7 years, we have seen, actually last 8 years, we have seen a loss of 53% of black wealth in America. The home foreclosure crisis has wiped that out. Elizabeth Warren was on my TV One show several years ago, and she said it will take black America 2 generations just to recoup that money. And so, give me a sense of your respective churches, the state of mind of your members when it comes to the idea of building wealth. How are you dealing with that in terms of the state of mind, how they see building wealth compared to how you see building wealth?
Roland, I would say that at least the members of Greater Mount Nebo and other churches that are part of something called the Collective Empowerment Group feel very encouraged, despite the economy, despite what has happened over the last 8 or 9 years, largely because we seized what is seen by a lot of people as a serious problem, and it is, but also as an opportunity. So what we've done is to turn around that problem and also provided a great deal of information. We have an empowerment conference every year through the Collective Empowerment Group. As a matter of fact, one is coming up the first weekend of June. We're right now already having classes with someone that started the D-Free movement, Reverend Buster Soares. And so we're taking those classes, and we've got at each one of our churches now over 120 persons in 10 different churches that are learning what it means to get out of debt, stay out of debt, and then begin to create wealth.
That's 120 people, but what is the capacity?
This is just starting. For example, yes, you're absolutely right. For example, in Prince George's County, you're talking about 900,000 people, and within the black church community, probably at least a good 300,000, 400,000 people, but at least it's a beginning. And we certainly hope to therefore roll this out so that those folks that have completed the training will turn around and become trainers themselves to educate even other people.
Absolutely. Go ahead, microphone right there.
Yeah, I was going to kind of chime in and say that I think for us and the people that we have influence with, I think we're setting up good precedents to not only affect change in this generation but the next. One of the things that we're really intentional about is making sure that people understand that the African American church, and really our emphasis on faith and financial literacy and wealth creation, that they understand that it's synonymous. 16 of the 38 parables that Jesus taught on, so almost half of what he taught on parables, have to do with money and possessions. Nearly about 500 verses on faith, a little less than 500 on prayer, but over 2,000 plus verses in the New Testament alone on money and possessions. So helping people to understand that this is not just a foreign agenda, this is not just a new conversation, a new topic. This is central to our faith, and it's been in the Bible the entire time. That begins to set up not only the education and the empowerment for this current generation, but for the next. And so we are a multi-site church, we have multiple campuses, and we also are a small group driven church. And so now,
how many campuses?
We currently have 3 now. We're planning another in the fall.
And what is your family member capacity?
Family member capacity?
Yeah. So first of all, how many families, how many members?
We're somewhere around 8,000 plus members, and I don't know what that breaks down to family-wise off the top of my head. But what is a part of the fabric of our church is not only the conferences that we do, the intentional programming that's discipleship oriented specifically for financial literacy and wealth creation, but also the small group component. So the majority of our members are in small groups at least 3 times a year, and we always have small groups that are geared towards financial literacy, fiscal responsibility, and understanding how to have the education to make the next generation aware as well.
And so before you answer, the reason I specified family and members, because a lot of times we talk about it in my pastor in Houston, Ralph Douglas West, talks about this. We talk about members, but the reality is many of our churches, when we talk about generational or based upon families. And also, because I want to get back to that, this idea of how do you, by focusing on families and getting them to understand, well, you're thinking about, multi-generational, and you're having folks also deal with accountability. Same thing in terms of the initial question to you.
Yeah, I would just say that when I first started pastoring, I wanted to make sure that we at the church didn't just address people on Sunday, but met their needs Monday through Saturday. And so we continue at this point to try to make sure that we deal with wealth creation, deal with financial literacy, that we bring people in to make sure that our people are comfortable talking about their finances and money and debt and those issues in an open setting where they're not judged, they're encouraged and inspired to make change. And so I think this crisis that we went through with the economy going down really represented an opportunity for churches that saw the need and really spoke to it to bring our members in and embrace them around the idea of financial literacy and literacy itself and wealth creation and those issues that we've done that in so.
The reason I started with the issue about housing, because the reality is most Americans accrue their wealth through housing, especially African Americans. But what we're looking at is something that is extremely significant in that, based upon the Pew study, the average white family has a household about $100,000 to $110,000. Average African American household, $5,000. And so when you are dealing with your members, what is that conversation about debt? But specifically, how are you trying to change one's mindset about how they look at purchasing? Because we love to talk about $1.1 trillion spending power, but if you have a $1.1 trillion spending power and you literally have a 50 billion saving power, you got an imbalance. And so how have you dealt with that, and how have your members responded to you being open and honest about debt?
Oh, they've been very much open to it because of the climate and the environment that we've created, so that people can speak honestly about it, but they also realize that indeed getting out of debt will get them out of bondage. And so therefore there becomes a real sense of liberation. We actually have testimonies of people that come forward after they've gotten out of debt to be able to share with the other members of the congregation how it feels to be free of debt. And so therefore it excites other people to want to do the same thing. So it's really been transformative in that regard to know full well. And then secondly, just having people to change their whole mindset about things that they need versus what they may want. I advocate all the time. I tell people, listen, you may want a car, but what you need right now is a subway car. And that really helps to change the whole dynamic. So it's really about having people to think differently about the money that God has entrusted to their care. So it's really about stewardship in a way that's going to honor the Lord.
Yeah, I want to come back to, for me, it's a discipleship issue. Often, historically, churches have only focused on the giving component, the 10%, when biblically, it's really the 100%. Every spending issue is a spiritual issue. And so we're intentional to communicate that. And I think that the pulpit, particularly in the African American community, is one of the greatest platforms for communicating principles that will change the lives of people. And so we're very strategic in terms of teaching those concepts and then following up with the programming that's going to grow people in the area, but then not just that, also modeling it. And so helping people to understand biblically that the Word of God is very clear about the will for God in His people to be debt-free. It is the will of God for us to be debt-free, and the Bible is replete with that. People just got to, number one, know it. They've got to, be taught it, but then it's got to be modeled. And so for our church, we model debt freedom, we model generosity, but then you talked about changing the mindset. And the big issue is changing the mindset from being consumers to producers. That's when we begin to tap into really creating wealth and raising up the next generation of entrepreneurs. And so once again, that's what we model, that's what we teach, that's also what we invest in, and it's something that is upfront. We don't apologize for it. We can laugh about it, but at the same time, my teaching and what we point people to is intentional to change the mindset. And so our approach to ministry is not just Sunday morning to have a hallelujah good time. That's not how we measure whether or not we've been effective. We measure it by mindset change and lifestyle change, and that's something that you can see and measure on a day-to-day basis.
So give me some examples of how you actually do it, in terms of either in the service or in your programs afterwards, some actual examples.
Sure.
Well, let me see, examples of what? Examples of us reaching out?
No, examples of how you will present folks something publicly that can cause a mindset change. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the most recent things is at least once or twice a year, often it's twice, I'm going to do an intentional teaching series. So my teaching calendar is planned a year out. So we're going to do a teaching series that is based on stewardship, debt freedom, an entrepreneurial understanding of our responsibility as believers, and then everything that the church does for that 6 to 8 weeks is going to foster that. So one of the more recent things that we did in Alabama, the payday loan industry is rampant. Alabama is one of the top places in the country for payday lending. One of the things that we did throughout the series, while I'm teaching on debt freedom, while I'm teaching on being a producer and not a consumer, we're also gaining information from people in the congregation and around the community that are snowed under with payday loans. And at the end of the series, we paid all of those payday loans off. And so, you're talking about $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 worth of payday loan debt that as a church, we didn't ask for anything from them. It wasn't a bait and switch. It was our opportunity as a community to come together and put those principles into action. We mandated that those individuals go through our ongoing financial literacy and empowerment training. We have ongoing partnerships with some local banks and other resources to make sure that they not only get out, but stay out. And it became a church-wide community effort. So it reinforces the principles that they just learned, and we also help them to make sure that their lifestyle helps to maintain what they just received. And so that's something that we're doing more than just once a year, but it's intentional and it's strategic, even down to our kids. So as I'm teaching it to the adults, the kids' curriculum for that entire 6 to 8 weeks, they're learning the same thing. Our youth are learning the same thing. So then what that does is it fosters a conversation around the dinner table that ultimately is changing the mindsets, not only of the parents, but the youth. So that's how we tap into generational change.
You see, the thing that jumps out at me when we talk about changing a mindset, and I talk about this a lot on my radio show and television show as well, is I think, again, most folks don't associate what you buy over here to what you invest in over here. So let me throw this out to give me a sense if you've done something similar to this. So let's say it's around Christmas time, right to Thanksgiving, or let's talk about birthdays or whatever. And imagine if you stood up and said, okay, how many of you plan on buying your son or your daughter a pair of Nike? Call them up, fine. And then literally you say, fine, if you want to buy your son the new LeBron James shoes, it's going to run you $200. But the Nike stock price closed at $56. And so if you said, fine, we're going to open up the Ameritrade account or whatever kind of company, and so instead of buying $200 for the shoes, you're going to buy your son or daughter 4 shares of Nike stock. And literally say, now, in a year, the shoes will be worn out and you need a new pair, but the stock will still be there. And I did this with one of my colleagues because I was going to a game and I forgot my shoes at home. I said, I need some white tennis shoes. So I just ran to Walmart. I don't know what they were, Stars or something, $25. And so she's like, I can't believe you're wearing those shoes. I said, okay, first off, they're comfortable. I said, 2, I really don't give a damn what you think, because I ain't trying to impress you. I said, but 3, I had to remind her, because she had an apartment broken into and all her Nikes were stolen. I said, see, if they broke into your house, they could not have stolen those stock certificates, they were still yours. And so she was caught up in her Nike collection. I said, but it's not making you any money. And so that's about me in terms of example, because I think with somebody sitting in that pew, they probably would never associate buying 4 shares of Nike stock for $200, which is the same cost for the pair of shoes, and realize that in 5-10 years, that stock might be $70-80.
But I think that's why we have to change people's mindset. I know we do that at Pilgrim. We try to make people think about long-term things rather than just what's happening right now.
And what examples are you giving them where they are under, oh, now I got it, now I see what you're talking about, versus, because there's an intellectual, theoretical discussion and a real-life example. Go ahead.
Well, similar to what you just said, now I got to take that back home and do that until we stop. I think that's excellent. That's excellent. But I think that we try to tell our members that there's certain things you're going to use, and by the time you get it and it goes home for a few days, it's gone. But there are things that you can invest in that are going to ultimately reap great benefits down the line. And I know through our church we have a investment, we call it the investment zone, but it's people who get together and their job is to look at investments and encourage other members to invest together, and it's just going wonderful.
Okay, so let me ask you this question with that. Hold on a second. So with that, there are a lot of people who have jobs and they have 401ks and they have no idea. They just write something down. So do you have your members, do you create a situation where you tell your members, if you were 401k, you're about to enroll, bring it in, and we will have one of our investment folks sit with you to go over your options so you know you're maximizing your 401k plan.
We don't have that exactly. We have people who are available and who spend their time, volunteering their time to make sure that if people have questions, they have suggestions, recommendations, whatever, they go over with them best practices when it comes to their investments, and we try to be there to sort of watch over that, sort of to make sure that they are investing in solid investments.
Yeah, we do it great about Debo. We do have investment counselors within the church that have been vetted, if you will, to make sure that they're going to be able to provide competent, spiritually based guidance and information to persons. but also through, again, I referenced the Collective Empowerment Group. We have strategic partners that have also been vetted, who are investment counselors, to make sure that they're able to provide support. Now, one thing I would add though, Roland, in the midst of all of this, is that when it comes to purchases, one of the things that we're also very conscious about in Greater Mount Nebo, whether it's Christmas time or any other time, is to buy black. We really want to get to the point where people think very, very carefully about supporting black businesses. You talked about the $1.5, $1.6 trillion. Where are we spending those dollars? And I encourage people, wherever possible, find a way to support a black business.
Now, when you say buy black, what do you then, as a resource, what do you provide to them? Do you provide a list?
I'll give you several things.
Is it a website? Is it an app? Is it on paper?
Several things. Number one, through the Collective Empowerment Group, we actually have a website called churchbizchamber.com, in which members of the respective churches that make up the Collective Empowerment Group, of which there are 150 just in the Washington area, members of those churches can then be posted on that website. And people can go and take a look at the functional area. People can also use the USBC app. And we encourage people to do that so that they have a choice. As a matter of fact, I think as many people know, only 3% of our disposable income is spent with black businesses. If we were to simply increase that by just to 10%, Northwestern University performed a study several years ago, 1 million new jobs would be created that could go towards black folk. So I'm very intentional in making sure.
1.9 million unemployed black people?
Yeah, so I'm very intentional in making sure that we're supporting black businesses wherever we can.
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on that. We give people all of the steps. We have the investment resources. But for me, the bigger issue that has to be addressed is the root cause. And when you start talking about creating African-American wealth, you have to start, particularly in a lot of our communities that we minister to. So our church is extremely diverse. We've got low income to wealthy. And so you've got to also couple the resources and the tools with the education, because most individuals don't know where to start. They don't know the rules of money. So my mother was the first person in our family. My grandmother, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. My grandmother was a maid for wealthy white families. My grandfather was a country preacher and a postal worker. My mother is the oldest of 5. She was the first person in our family to go to college. My mother climbed the corporate ladder, but no one ever taught her how to manage money. No one ever told her about how to invest the money. And so part of the church's responsibility is to not only say don't spend, but some basics of how you handle money and how money works has to be consistently communicated. And then it has to be modeled. And so one of the things that our congregation knows, you know, my wife and I planted our church with 20 families, and we started from nothing. We didn't have a denominational background. We didn't have wealthy patrons. But God had given us success in business as entrepreneurs prior to planning the ministry. And I was in the real estate side of business. I also was a financial planner, and I was heavily invested in the market. So every time that I'm teaching on understanding how money works, I'm going to tell the story about when I bought Apple stock. I bought Apple stock before Apple was popular. And so, you know, we have written Apple, and we will continue to write it. The joke I tell people is I'm Apple-stolic. Because as long as they're doing well, we're going to do fine. But the point is, it has to be modeled, because historically, depending on where people come from, they look to figures to not only tell them, but to model it for them. And the African American church, I think, has unfortunately had some really bad models. And so there are mindsets and there are approaches to things that have been perpetuated for a number of reasons. Number one, because those subjects haven't really been broached and talked about cogently, or because we've had bad models. We had preachers who, you know, were the icon in the parable, you know, of suits, and they were the picture of consumerism, not production. And so we've got to not just teach it consistently. We've got to make sure that it's not only a part of the discipleship process, but it has to be modeled. Because if not, people reproduce what they see, not just what you tell them.
But also, I think it is. So I think what happens is, whenever we have this conversation, I'll hear folks say, I just can't believe we're doing this. And John Bryant and I talked about this. If you go to YouTube, and look up Freedmen's Bank 150th celebration. Moderated that panel. John was on it, Bernice King, Andrew Young was on it, and a couple of others. And what John talks about is that after signing the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln also established the Freedmen's and the Freedmen's Bank. He's killed 2 months later, and basically that bank suffered through about 10, 11, 12 years of mismanagement. But the intent initially was to teach free slave financial literacy.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, then also if you look at it this way, which, and I've been stuck on this for the longest, 397 years since the first slave touched in Jamestown, Virginia. So if you go 1619 to 1863, and then you have the Emancipation Proclamation, Texas finds out in 1865, then 12 years of Reconstruction, then Jim Crow starts in 1877 with the Great Compromise of 1877, and we got sold up to Republicans and Democrats. Then you go from 1877 all the way through 1900s, 1930, 40, 50, 60. So I often use 1970 as a marker when African Americans technically have been fully free. Technically. Still had lawsuits, still locked out. We're only talking 46 years.
Exactly.
Which means, I'm 47. So I'm born in 68, which means I was born into America when black was not technically free. So a lot of this, and so you talk to Eddie Brown, a lot of black folks didn't even get into money management until early 70s. Granted, you get outliers, African Americans who were independently wealthy, but collectively. So you're only talking 46 years of technically free. And so when you talk about that history, a lot of that is tied up in that, because when we were forced to, frankly, build a nation and be in debt to the nation, of course you're nothing but consumers, because that's been the story for nearly 397 years.
That's why I think, and that's why I am so pro financial literacy, because that knowledge has been denied from us. We didn't know it, we didn't have access to it, we were not taught it for too many years. So even now in 2016, for many people, you're talking about maybe second generation, third generation high income earners, and a lot of individuals are stepping into money, but they still don't have the tools and the resources and the understanding of how to manage it. And it falls to the church as the community hub, coming out of slavery, what the church was then in terms of being a one-stop shop for the African American community, for education, for empowerment, for everything. The church has to understand that that's still our calling. And when you start talking about changing communities and changing the African American culture, not just in this generation, but the next, it has to rest on financial literacy and financial literacy.
I'm going to ask you this question for each one of you. Child is born. Who has the immediate conversation with the parents about opening up a college savings plan right now?
Within our congregation, Greater Mount Nebo does. I mean, we make it a point of saying.
So when they come in and say, talk about baby baptism, you say, let's talk about the college savings plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. We spend time because we know the cost of going to a college or a university now. And so we want to make sure that indeed those parents are planning properly. And the best way to do that is to make sure that they understand about the investment instruments that are available to them that they need to take advantage of. So absolutely we make that so that when it's time for that child to go to college, they're not scrambling to try to find a pastor. Can you tell me about an extra summer job for my child? It ought to be at that point that that's just a little bit of gravy that's added to what's already been taken care of in terms of setting aside that money, or hoping that that child will get a sports scholarship. We want those notions to be gotten rid of very, very quickly, and we do it from the very beginning.
So let's also talk about the state on college. I'm still dealing with mindset. We have $1 trillion in student loan debt. But here's one thing I find to be interesting. And so I'll talk to folks and I say, I want my child to go to Spelman. And I go, but do you have Spelman money? Because what you'll see is if you actually go to Morehouse and Spelman, you'll see a high entry rate freshman and sophomore year, but then it drops off because they can't afford to come back. And so, give me a sense of the discussions you actually have in churches, walking your members through that, baby, I know your mind may want your child to go to any school they want to, but your money can't go to any school. And how do you have that discussion to say, you might want to go to the community college for 2 years first, you might want to go to this public school versus trying to go to the private school, because again, a lot of folks, that's my ideal, but they're not thinking about that invoice on the back end.
Sure. Well, that's why it's important, I think, for us to have a discussion at the baby baptism. They come in for the baby baptism class, part of our process is they write a vision for their lives. Those parents write a vision for the lives of those children. But that process, we talk about these things from that very point so that people can be aware of the kinds of issues that do come up. We as a church also have been very, very liberal in terms of, people who come to us who are in that very situation, whose children can't go back to school or something that's come up or whatever, and they need to try to put their child back in school. We've been, as a church, very sensitive to that, and we have, right now we have, I believe, 9 full-time students that are in universities right now that we as a church sponsor. We continue to do it, and we continue to pay for people who come to us who can't go back to college, who need to go back. I've faced them several times, and we try to make sure that we do something for them. But that's why from the baby class, right on through our church as a whole, we try to emphasize the idea of investment.
But then you also have that hard discussion. And I'm just give you an example. I had a young lady, I was at a Black Journalist Convention, and she said she was graduating from a university, but she wanted to get her master's from Howard. And I said, why? She said, well, what do you mean, why? I said, well, in this business, a master's degree is not going to add 10 cents to your salary. I said, do you have student loan debt? She said, yeah. I said, so you about to add on top of your student loan debt by going to get a master's from Howard, because you always want to get a master's from Howard. I said, and it's not going to add $1 to your starting salary. So then she said, well, all right, well, I want to teach one day. I said, you 22. You do know you can get that master's later. And she looked at me like I was crazy. And like my advice made no sense. And I said, I'm trying to get her to understand, in her mind, it was, no, but that's what I always wanted. I said, yeah, that sheet of paper gonna look real nice on your wall, but you're gonna be paying for it. And she never understood that. I was trying to get her to understand that I don't believe in getting any additional degrees unless that's gonna make me more money. Okay? I ain't one of these people who said, I promised my mama I was gonna come and get a doctorate. I don't give a damn about no doctorate. That's great. If it can't make Roland, look, I can't do it. And my wife, she got a bunch of those, she loves school, knock yourself out. But I think we don't have real, tangible discussions with people. And we have individuals in our churches, individuals in our families who are making decisions that they feel good, but now they're even worse off financially. And so how does it make you feel good if it's now impacting your ability to be able to save, invest, and prepare for retirement?
I think part of the answer to that too, Roland, would be that people really need to do something that we've talked about implicitly but not have said it explicitly, and that is everybody's got to have a budget. Everybody does need to sit down in a very basic way, take a look at what you are spending and what you're bringing in, so that at the end of the figurative day as well as the literal day or month, you will see how much is left.
The budget, but still think mindset. Because I think what happens is I think a lot of times we have the classes, but we really don't say, no, I need to break the generational cycle that's in your head, but that's gonna make me feel better, when it's really not. It's making you poor.
Well, but a couple of factors. We once again have to understand the root cause issues. Okay, education for a very long time was the way out for people of color. But what's happened is that ethic has been driven into our psyche and our understanding, and it's not a bad understanding. Okay, But what's happened at the same time, that this new generation and others are coming up, understanding that education is one of the ways for me to better myself and to get out, the value of education has been diminished. So the landscape economically of the value of that degree and what it translates to in the working economy, that's changed.
Right.
But often, the connection between knowing that it's changed and me having to course correct, that's where the disconnect is. And so one of the...
And I'll be honest with you, that's I really do believe one of the problems, one reason we have massive student debt is because folks are just going anywhere,
right,
majoring in anything, and you're going, you know you can't get a job in that. I mean, I literally had a brother stand up at a forum. He had $150,000 student loan debt. He went to Xavier for his undergrad, Xavier for his master's, was at Tulane for his PhD, wanted to be a university professor. And I literally said, who told you to go to 2 private schools? It never clicked in his head that the cost at the 2 private schools was far higher than a state university. And he was like, well, yeah, but that's just where I went. I said, yeah, but you have walked into your own economic tsunami. And he literally had no idea what we were talking about. He was mad and upset. And I said, somebody should have told you, bro, go to the, if you want to go there and get your PhD, fine. Go over here first, which would be cheaper. He never understood the cost over here and the degree. And now he's in a massive hole that he likely will spend 30 years trying to get out of.
Yeah, but the problem is a relatively new phenomenon. And so the issue of education on that side, learning how the landscape has changed so that my plan can reflect it. So going back to what Pastor said, we drive from the very beginning that every family ought to have a financial plan. Because the issue of budgeting and even starting a business has very little to do with how much money you make. It has everything to do with what you do with what you have.
Right.
And most things you can accomplish if you have a plan to. The next step that has to happen, because we still got a long way to go in terms of empowering our community, that's the basic that they need to start with.
Right.
The next piece that has to come into the conversation is that education is not necessarily what it was. So then we have to empower people to understand that there are some different decisions. We don't want to devalue education, but the way we go about it has got to change.
Because the reality of education is actually turned also into a racket.
Right, but the gentleman went to Tulane and Xavier,
especially these private schools.
Right, but historically, you know, his parents and others see those schools as a prestigious opportunity. That my baby got to Xavier, he got to Howard. You know, years ago, that was a sign that I've arrived. And so now what has to happen is the value proposition of those degrees, because it's changed, we got to get that message to the next generation.
Who has a church investment club?
We have one, absolutely.
And how many members do you have in it? How many members do you have in your church investment club? What's the amount that you can come into the investment club, and how has it grown?
$50 will get you into the investment club, and we've got about 250 members.
So $50 a month?
$50 a month.
Okay, and you got about 250 members. So in that investment club, they have their own group that really decides what their investments are. How large is their portfolio?
Oh gosh, I don't know what the estimate is at this point, Roland, but it's significant. It's grown because we've had the investment club now for about 9 years.
Yeah, we're the same way. The numbers as it relates to the amount of people fluctuate because we do a small group system. We do them semesters. And so I can still be in a small group but maybe not participate as actively. That particular semester, we see a decline in the summer as everybody vacations. I need to find out the total portfolio is pretty substantial because we've been doing it for about 9 years now.
Okay.
Yes, we do as well. We do it just a little differently in that our members that do it is sort of not right now an exact part of the church. I'm not sure what the portfolio is, but we have a pretty wide group of members that participate in it, and we encourage what it is that they do.
One of the reasons I am pushing as hard as I am with specifics is because I think a lot of times, first of all, the moment you start talking about money, and we experienced this on my TV One show. Typically, there are these, as I said earlier, these theoretical, intellectual conversations about money. And the average person is sitting there going, I don't know what you're talking about. I ain't got no clue. You can say Roth, IRA, SEP, they're like, I got it. I don't know what you're talking about. And here's what we've experienced, because we do, Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, we do a segment twice a month. And often what happens is, when we finish that segment, she literally may get 200 or 300 emails or tweets or comments on Facebook, people with various questions. And every time we do it, she's blown away by it, because what we do is we try to break it down as simple as possible, using tangible examples. A person goes, oh, now I got that. As opposed to bringing in somebody and they're talking about, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, getting to understand, very small amounts. Do you also challenge? Do you also do any challenges where you say, okay, we want to know, from a member standpoint, what did you start with on January 1 or a year ago, and then now come back, where are you a year later?
Yes.
We do that certainly in terms of several areas. One is in terms of the debt reduction. We have people that are able to come back and say, I was able to pay off my credit cards, I was able to pay off my installment loans, I was able to pay off my car loan, and so that they're able to report that. And we not only have them report it to me, but they come before the congregation. And the whole purpose of that is to inspire others to be able to do the same thing.
Yeah, and we do the same thing. We do something called the Money Talks segment. That's a part of our kind of news segment. We not only teach on those principles, but capture the stories of the progress of people. Because the other thing too is, in African American context, often broaching that subject historically has been taboo.
Because nobody wants to, I don't want nobody in my business.
Or people view that there needs to be a divide between their spiritual life and their financial life. And so we found...
Except when they come pray, can you please pray I'm losing my job?
Exactly.
Can you pray my car don't get repossessed?
Exactly.
Yeah, so ain't no divide there.
Right, and what we found is when they see real people, because they expect some of this to come from the preacher, when they see real people and hear the stories, it encourages them. So we try to layer the motivation, and that's one of the things that we do every week.
All right.
I think people need a push. I think we did a...
Or a kick in the butt.
I'll call it a push right there. People need a push. And I think we did a campaign called Freedom. And in that process, we challenged our members to get rid of debt. And we did the whole process, financial literacy, and people coming in and writing their budgets out, and we did all of that. And what I was surprised by is just how many people really took it to heart. I mean, they really took it to heart, and I want to just let you know about one of our members who paid their house off in this process. And I mean, they were just so enthusiastic and overjoyed because they didn't think they'd be able to do it, but through the process of our Freedom Campaign, they put a strategy together, they stuck to it, and over, I don't know how many years it was, but they finally paid their house off. And when they paid their house off, what are they going to do then? They're going to be able to give more and all of that. They were excited about it.
You just went right there.
No, you just went right there. When I say freedom,
pay the house off. They can give more now. Yeah.
Give more to whatever they want to give to.
Yeah.
But when I say
added that right here.
Right, but when I say freedom, I want our people to be free. Bondage is poverty is a curse. A debt is a bondage. And so when you get free from that, you're able to do things. I told our members, I said, I want them to be able to write a check to anything they want to and not have to worry about it.
And I would add to it that we want our children to not be saddled with the same kind of bondage mentality or having to take off the debt that mama and daddy left behind. And so, we
just pulled together a group of our members around business ownership. And I was surprised first by how many business owners that are in our church. I was so encouraged by it. And I pulled them together around business ownership and some of the next generation. And so we had a breakfast and it was just wonderful. And But later on, I was in the parking lot a couple weeks later, and this little young man came to me. He said, Pastor, he said, I have a business. Now, I really understand what he was saying, but I have a business. I said, what do you say? I have a business. And you have a business? I have a business. I said, what's your business? He came to me and said he has a business called French Colors Bow Ties. He's about 7 years old. He's selling bow ties. I bought 10 of them. And so I'm just amazed by when you start talking about these things, how it does filter down to the next generation, and that youth entrepreneurship that I see burgeoning as well.
Before I go to the questions, do you also encourage your families to have real, honest discussions with their kids, such as literally let them know how much stuff costs? I mean, because I remember my wife and I were raising 6 of my nieces. Y'all what now?
That's real.
And so I travel a lot on the weekends, and so they would go out to eat after church. And then so one weekend I was here and she was gone, and so they said, "Where we going to eat?" I said, "No, we ain't going out to eat." They're like, "What?" I said, "It's 6 of y'all." No, because literally I said, "Hold up." I said, "Y'all go eat every Sunday?" And I said, "How much is the annual bill?" And I literally, so we sat in the car and I said, "All right, so I said, that's going to be about $125, $150 times 4 times 12. I said, how much y'all tutors cost? We don't know. This how much. I literally walked through and explained to them. I said, so it's 6 of y'all. I started cooking when I was 7. No, baking when I was 7, cooking when I was 8. I said, so between the 6 of y'all can figure out how to fix something that's already there. But I needed them to understand, just like when I bought them laptops, I said, this is the most expensive thing you ever had. I ain't paying for repairs, nothing. But I needed them to understand exactly what that cost, and it's interesting to me how many families don't want to do that to get their kids to understand, let me apply, I need to know what that costs and who paid for it, so I'm not taking it for granted.
Yeah, one of the things that my church here we say a lot is, particularly for the younger new generation coming up, they know the price of everything, but they don't know what it costs. And so one of the most important things that we teach parents that they have to do, and it's really not just about the next generation, it's really about protecting everything that those parents have worked to amass their life. Because, you know, what we've got to begin to do is not just think about creating wealth in this generation. You got to begin to think about second and third, and it's about stewarding, not just giving the money to the kids, but giving them the principles to manage the money. So, you know, Rockefeller is a great example of that. But yeah, that's a part of creating the family plan. The kids have to understand not just how to manage it, but the value of money. And so that they begin to weigh those decisions.
And I think that the parents have to model that, so that when daddy or mommy are going off to work, rather than spending money for lunch every day, there's no harm in taking that brown bag with you and finding out that at the end of the year, you saved yourself literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars. That could be used for that savings fund.
Yeah, make the kids fix it. I got to put to work. All right, we're going to go to questions here. And so back here in the red. Oh, we need one of the mics here. Actually, Ron, we're going to do this here. Okay, go ahead. He ain't gonna let you sit down. See, that's why I normally tell them to put your hand in your pocket, because y'all might be here all day. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, my name is Adora Gomez, and I'm Executive Director of International Businesses. We teach children ages 5 years old to 18 how to start, market, and manage their own business. To the 3 pastors, do you have an established youth entrepreneurship ministry at your church?
We do, and we've done it now for about the last 8 or 9 years, in which our young people, number one, we have black business owners in particular come into the church, people to tell their stories about how they got started, the pitfalls and challenges, but we also take the young people to the businesses themselves so that they can see the operation. And we've been doing that now for about the last 8 years. We have one of the members of our church who is indeed a small business owner herself, and she's the one that guides them through the whole process so that they learn about marketing, financing, developing a business plan, and all that entails for that business to be successful.
Yeah, we do as well, but I'm always open to continuing to grow it. And one of our staff pastors who is an entrepreneur and specializing in financial coaching, those kinds of things. That's all he does, but we're always open to augmenting and adding more to it.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles O'Neill from Dallas. I live in a community. I live in a community that in the last decade has seen about $1 billion in new sanctuary construction, virtually none of which was performed by Black contractors. How does the church address such a disparity, glaring disparity, that encumbers their congregation going forward?
Well, I think that number one, I want to use, again, as a model that we've got here in this area, plus 4 other chapters around the country, through the Collective Empowerment Group. We have strategic partners, and 99% of those strategic partners are Black-owned businesses. As a matter of fact, I know that one of them is in the audience, Amy Griffin, who has her own law firm over there. And so, but what I'm also saying is that we've got Black architects, we've got other Black engineers, we've got planners that are able to help design buildings. And so we are very intentional in trying to reach out to African-American owned businesses, and not just to build churches, but also for daycare facilities and for schools, other properties that are owned by the church or even by the members of our church.
Yeah, I want to try to address that too, because my vantage point, I'm not from Alabama. My wife and I moved there 11 years ago. The church is 10 years old. And so my experience was actually different. We're a multi-site church, and so we have 3 physical campuses. We're planning another one. And the issue for me has been the lack of relationship building. Because when you are in certain environments where as pastors you're looking for these resources, my struggle has been the absence of people of color in the conversation. And so I think we've got to do a better job of making sure that individuals that are credible and that look like us, that they're connected and established in the areas where leaders are trafficking so that they can be a part of the conversation. But then the other thing is they also need to be aware that the landscape of ministry is changing. So we are transitioning out of the day where the big sanctuary is still in vogue. And even when it was popular, it was a horrible business model. Because in Dallas, and I've spoken at some of the largest churches in Dallas and around the country, the majority of the pastors that built humongous congregations and sanctuaries to fit them, that haven't paid them off by now, they're in trouble. Because they often don't fill those sanctuaries up even one time a week. So from a business standpoint, what's happening across the landscape of America is that a lot of pastors are understanding that the paradigm is shifting. And those are the conversations that also need to be had with those individuals so we can come up with better strategies. And that's part of the reason why we're multi-site. But then from a banking standpoint, that's a brand new thing in the African-American context. So we need everybody around the table so that people are knowledgeable and we can move forward together. Because even the multi-site piece is so new that we've had to educate banks, and then we also then have had to educate architects and engineers and others for them to understand conceptually what we're doing and why we're doing it. And for those that don't know or don't have any point of reference, then that limits their ability to help us get where we're trying to go. You follow what I'm saying?
I think it's talking about, I think Black churches have to consider not only what they, what they're saying. I want to know how we're spending our dollars in terms of the buildings that we build, because we do build huge buildings, although I agree that that day is over.
Yep.
That's not, you won't see as many mega buildings in the future as you see right now, because a lot of those mega buildings are mega empty.
Yep.
Right now. They're mega empty. And so I think when it comes to the buildings that we build, the banking relationships that we have, and when it comes to the dollars that we spend as a church, we spend a lot of money as a church for various kinds of services. And so I think we need to just do an analysis of, and that's happening more and more, of where our dollars are going as a church, and be sure that they're being put back into our community? And if so, some of the members that go to the church as well.
Well, I'll also say this. I will say this about buildings, because what you also you're seeing, even people who are strong in their faith, the number of people who are going to church 4 times a month dramatically drop. And then you talk about 3 and even 2 because there's so many different options. And the reality is, the internet has also changed the game.
Yep.
In terms of how folks also do church. One of the things that I see is, and I speak all across the country, when you talk about buildings, too many churches also are operating from the standpoint of that facility is only open at best twice a week.
Exactly.
So versus thinking about that facility as a multi-use facility that can serve multiple purposes beyond just Bible study and church on Sunday, now you give a better understanding of the use of facility, and that can be used in different ways as opposed to just the traditional way.
And that's a big banking issue too, because most churches that are, they go under, or if they're foreclosed on for whatever reason, it becomes a challenge for banks to unload it, because most churches that have been built, in the traditional sense, they're a single-use facility.
Right.
And so that's a part of what I meant when I said that it's a bad business model in a variety of ways. But if we can begin to think, as you've been talking about, then it just positions the church for viability for the longer term.
And if the church begins to think about how it can connect with the broader community, so that if you've got a university where perhaps the church can become a satellite, classes to be taught there, or a hospital, where indeed the church again could be a site that perhaps treats people before they even think about going to the hospital. So there's a variety of ways of thinking, and even connecting with local government to provide services where the government will pay for them out of the church.
Of course, real before the next question, any credit unions in your churches?
We don't have a credit union, and we're not planning to have one again because of what we've done in terms of trying to support black banks. And so in our area, through the Collective Empowerment Group, we are indeed supporting Industrial Bank in this area, so we're directing people to support that institution.
Got it.
Good evening, thank you, Roland and pastors. My name is Tashana from the Fresno Metro Chamber. The question I have is, as the panelist was talking, it appeared as though some of the things kind of duplicate what chambers do. Some of the things are not all. And I understand that, the church is not just families, communities, and things of that nature. Whereas the chamber, we're focusing on businesses. So my question is to you, pastors, does the church have a relationship with the local chambers? Like to address one of the questions, for example, when there's big projects, the church is going to do some building project or various things going on, so the church can utilize black businesses and expertise. So do your churches have any programs or any working relationships with chambers? And if not, does something like that be developed so when things are going on in the community, that the professionals in the community can be tied in with the churches and then the overall community develop?
Well, we certainly do. Ron was my member for a long time. Curry Brown is here. I know him well. We have a relationship with him. We try to make sure that we keep the line of communication open. Even the things that we're doing in terms of trying to get our entrepreneurs together and that kind of thing is in no way to replace what the chamber is doing. In fact, it's to drive more people to the chamber. It's to, because what I found is what I'm interested in, my members are interested in. And so if I show interest in a particular way and pull them together, their support will be there. So it's in no way to replace. I believe the chamber represents a tremendously valuable group. And so when it comes to certain kinds of things, there's no way to replace the chamber. I want to make sure we support the chamber.
Well, here's my question though, from you. If there are churches in your area that have identified the members that have owners, are you doing church chamber recruitment days? All right, Kit.
He's a chamber president. What we do in Fresno, once a month, community members, different communities, sororities, churches, they all come to the chambers once a month, every morning, and we have this discussion. So it's not only businesses, but it's other groups outside of businesses that have these conversations.
That's my question. So my question. You said they're coming to you. I'm saying, are you going to them? So what I'm saying is, so his church has identified 30, 40, 50 businesses in his church, and you multiply that by 10, are you partnering the churches to have church chamber recruitment day where you go to the church, make yourself available, and say, who in here has a business, you should join our chamber, you can sign up right now?
I think we need to work on that. It's something I know that there are members that are taking part in that because they belong to churches, but as a programmatic, maybe. Also, I'd like to further also state that we should not only go after and target the churches, but we have different faiths. We have Muslims as well in African American community as well as smaller churches. I think we should really recruit all faith-based organizations within our community to work on that. But to answer your question, there's not a direct event program, there's an indirect event program.
Well, I would make that direct because again, we talk about this as a two-way street. If you're trying to grow chamber members, they may not even know you exist. Some folks may not like that, but it's true. So I know if I was running the chamber, I would say I'm going to identify 10, 12, 15, 20 churches, and I want to come there, and if there are members there, we're going to have our services, and we want you to join on the spot. You may end up, if you hit 10 churches, and you pick up 5 new members at each church, you've now added 50 new businesses to your chamber membership that you didn't even realize even existed, and now they know about your resources. Question over here.
I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. I don't give my name, but
so you're not giving your name?
Well, I don't usually do that, though. My name is Roby Williams.
I thought you were wanted or something.
Because it ain't about me, that's why. Anyway, in Memphis, about several years ago, they did during the Sweets period, they did a lead story on televangelists. And they showed the homes that they lived in. There's a gentleman, Steve, I can't remember that built the Baptist church, a large church in the region. Caucasian gentleman lives in a community called Cordova. His house is $475,000. Then they showed some brothers who...
his house is $475,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Then they showed some brothers who also televangelists, if you will. Their homes were worth $800,000 to $1.35 million. And I did some investigation, lawyers might call it discovery. And what I came up with is this. I talked to contractors. What they did with this, they all use Caucasian contractors. And what they would do, we're going to build a $4 million church. Build it for $3.5 million, build me a house for $500,000, and we don't use black contractors because they might kill our membership. How do we stop that practice? We got over 12 churches in Memphis worth $4 million, over 12. And all of the preachers there got big old homes in gated communities. And what that does, it inhibits the growth of African American contractors. It's a lose-lose situation. How do we correct that?
Could you clarify the question? Is your issue that they don't use contractors?
They don't use our contractors, and the reason they say they don't use it because they don't think the Caucasian contractor gonna let us know that they're building their house on the side, and we don't know about it. You follow what I'm saying? So we burn the church mortgage, they burn their house mortgage.
Right.
Do you understand that?
No, I understand your question, but
How does it start that process?
okay, well, hold up. If your business model is based on churches being built, that's going to be a failed model. So here's the question that I had when you said our contractors. How many are we talking about?
How many African American contractors? How many Caucasian contractors?
African American.
We have a whole bunch of them.
No, and that's precisely my point.
But
No, follow me here. First of all, how many churches are being built on an annual basis?
say one a year.
Okay, one a year. You ain't gonna eat on one a year.
True.
So, to be perfectly honest with you, I ain't worried about what they're doing. What I will be focused on is how am I building capacity non-churches? Because that's where your business growth is. Now, the reason I ask you how many, and Ron knows this, and I've done it here. I've done black chamber events all across the country. And one thing we rarely talk about, mergers and acquisitions. So the question really for me is, what's the largest black contractor in Memphis, in a city where you have black leadership in the county? Do you have a capacity issue as opposed to the litany of small folks and virtually no big folks?
All of the above.
Okay, so really what I'll be trying to have in Memphis to say, how can we have 3, 4, 5 of us actually create a mega construction company where we can now bid on 30, 40, 50, $100 million projects as opposed to worried about what some chicken eating dinner pastor down here doing with somebody on the side. You're not going to eat on one church being built a year. So I'm saying your focus is in the wrong place. Forget that church and build capacity there in Memphis. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, one other thing that I want to add to it, though, is, we're also talking about, at least the point you brought up, we're also talking about the psychology of how business is done in different communities. And you have to address that because everything revolves around relationships. And so those relationships have got to be established, and they can't be one-offs. The leadership coaching and stuff that I've done around the world for companies and top CEOs, I'm always teaching the win-win principle. And then great relationships are forged over time. And so if we would make a healthy investment in developing those relationships the right way, then it's not just whether or not you can build the church or build the house. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so you're talking about the difference between getting one-off projects and getting multiple projects, particularly if it's a healthy person and a healthy organization or church. They're going to have multiple projects. And that's one of the biggest things that you see the difference in sometimes when you talk about the psychology of how business is done. Some of my other friends are not interested in just one-off. They're interested in being a partner long-term. And that's a huge deal, because over the long term, trust is built, relationships are solidified, and then I don't have to worry about what you go and tell other people, because I have a level of trust with you that's been built over time. Anybody who comes to me and I don't know them, I'm going to be skeptical. And that's just good business. You get what I'm saying? Got it. All right.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Key. I'm president of the Collin County Black Chamber of Commerce, also a business and estate planning and probate attorney. And it's great to create wealth, but what we don't do as a culture, as African Americans, is maintain that wealth by passing it on to our children. Over 60% of African Americans don't have a will or estate plan. And as business owners, we don't make succession plans. So my question to the panel is, what are you doing in your ministries to educate our African American community about the importance of having that estate plan, having a succession plan for your business?
Yeah.
We have testing, all right? Now we have an advocacy ministry in our church that does a lot of those kinds of things, where they frequently do workshops for members of our church. I really push the idea of having a will, having succession planning, and so they do a wonderful job of workshops where they actually go through the process with our members. We have attorneys in our church that do it, and they go through the process with our members in terms of succession planning and wills and trusts and all of those kinds of things. And it's really become something that the members of our church really see as something they really need to do, where I think years ago it really wasn't getting much traction. It's getting more traction as I continue to communicate.
And at Greater Mount Nebo, we actually have every year a pro bono day in which we've got approximately 30 attorneys that are coming, covering a variety of issues, including estate planning, but also by virtue of my role at Industrial Bank. Amy, stand up again, Amy Griffith has actually done presentations at Industrial Bank, and I have driven members of our church to those sessions as well. So no, you're absolutely right. We've got to do far more in terms of making sure that we're leaving wealth behind as opposed to debt behind. And the only way we can do that is we've got to educate our members. And then oftentimes making sure that it's not just for the parents, but also teaching our children so that they're beginning to make investments on the long term, so that while they hardly think about it typically, because they're normally thinking only in their teens and early 20s, but they've got to learn the lesson of indeed setting money aside even at that young age, so that when they reach 55 and 60, they won't have to worry about working for someone, but in fact to make a choice as to whether or not they work for someone because they've saved enough money and invested enough money.
We teach it biblically. You have to walk people through how to apply it to their lives practically, which is something we do ongoing. But here's the big thing, particularly for the African American community. It has to be modeled. What's happening now, and will happen even more so over the next 10 to 15 years, is there's going to be a gap in African American Christian leadership, because a lot of the generals are dying. And one of the big issues that the church is facing is that a lot of these key leaders in churches across the country, that the church themselves haven't prepared for the succession and the transition. So if the pastor dies tomorrow, the church is scurrying because the church doesn't have key man policies. The church doesn't have a succession plan in place. So the pastor's been there for 50 years and hasn't discipled and raised up somebody to carry the baton on. So that's that modeling piece that I mentioned earlier. I cannot overstate how important it is, because people will hear it if you teach it. You will help them if you walk them through how to do it practically, but you will keep it in their face if it is modeled on every front.
But again, I want to remind us, because I think it happens a lot. I go back to technically free 46 out of 397 years. A lot of us get frustrated saying, why do we do this? When the reality is, most of us can only go back one generation that was doing some of this stuff. And at the end of the day, if you don't know, you don't know. So for me, I've stopped getting frustrated with what happens, and my deal now is, okay, I accept what is happening. Now, how do we then begin to change it, and as you say, begin to model it? And so that's the first thing. Everybody leaving here, if you get frustrated with what is happening financially, economically with African Americans, just say, we only talking 46 years. And that puts you in perspective to go, now breathe, now get to work. Question.
Two things real quick. First, we talked about African American owned financial institutions. My simple question, first question, is why or what is restricting you from putting 10% of the church money that you raise every Sunday into a black institution on Monday morning instead of traditional banks?
Hold up, that's a broad general question. No, hold up. Give me a second. Do you bank with a black bank?
Absolutely. Let me just say
That's the first question.
Second question.
Hold on. Only one person answered.
But can I?
Go ahead.
But not only do we bank at a black bank, industrial bank, secondly, we actually have days in which I remind people that if you have an account at another financial institution that you think is closer, convenient to you, take the extra mile, literally, to go to a black bank. Now in our area here, it's industrial bank. But on several occasions, I've had people to literally, even before I've extended the invitation to Christian discipleship. When Maggie Anderson, who wrote the book Our Black Year came, and she preached for us, the first thing I said was, now, before I extend the invitation, those of you that do not have an account at Industrial Bank, and you're willing to do so, I want you to come forward right now. On that particular Sunday morning, we had 300 people to come forward. And I asked them at that point, and I said, now, I want you to open the account before Thursday. And so people wanted to know with those puzzled looks, and I said, I want you to do it before Thursday because I sit on the board and we're having a board meeting on Thursday and I'd like to give a praise report. And in fact, the president of the bank called me on Tuesday of that week and said, Pastor Weaver, what did you do over there on Sunday? I said, what are you talking about? He said, we've had a flood of new depositors on yesterday, meaning that Monday and Tuesday. So we do that periodically and we do it intentionally.
Yes. Go ahead.
Birmingham is not as fortunate to have Industrial Bank. I was in the session and talked to the representative from Liberty for that reason. The other thing you gotta also remember is that, particularly with churches, most banks, if you're in a lending relationship with them, they want either all or the majority of your depositing relationships. And so the ability for us to develop a relationship with an African American bank gives us that door.
I'm only talking 10%.
Hold on. He's gonna finish explaining.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, it gives us the opportunity then to begin to move those resources over. So for us, we haven't had the relationship. And once again, because I'm not a native of Birmingham, it's taken me a little bit longer to build it. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. But it is possible. The other thing is that those African American institutions have got to understand the tolerance and the need for churches as it relates to lending, so that the relationship is win-win. Because the issue that we run into is we need certain things from institutions, and depending on the relationship, they either will or will not provide it, which then forces us, in some respects, to have to go to another institution.
Right here.
I'm encouraged during my time here to see how that may happen. I've read the Industrial Bank, we've been talking about it, to see what we can do in terms of our deposits, to try to see if...
Because you're based where?
Phoenix, Arizona.
Got it.
So we don't have some of the relationships we have here on the East Coast with that kind of banking. But I'm encouraged by it. I've had several conversations already about it, and look forward to seeing what we can do as a church in that regard.
Next follow-up.
Well, I'm encouraged that you're having a discussion. Second point, ask you to think carefully now. Is there any restrictions that you know of that would prevent you from having an offering only on the 5th Sundays of the year? There's only 4 in a year, where you support institutions that you believe in, i.e. Urban League, Chambers, NAACP, and that's your contribution back to the community to support those institutions that serve you.
Yeah, we are already doing that. In Birmingham, we are the largest faith-based supporter of the UNCF. So we're doing that in a significant way as it relates to the colleges and historically black universities.
And the way that we handle that, we build it into our budget for the year. So in other words, money is already set aside for specific organizations that will further the cause of folks within our community.
I think if you were to look on the schedule of what we support as a church, we might be at the top of every one. The Urban League, NAACP, we support every organization. We don't have an offering particularly like him. It's just in our budget every year.
We make budget, we make line items in our budget for that as well.
All right, we're going to have final comments. I'll start with LaFari. Your final comments.
I'm really excited to be a part of the conversation, and I'm looking forward to this being really more of a focus for churches around the country, particularly churches of color, because this is necessary. Financial literacy is the new civil rights movement, or financial empowerment is the new civil rights movement. And with me being in Birmingham, that's one of the things that I preach and teach often, because the city is in the shadow of the historic civil rights movement. We've got to turn the corner into translating that to what we do today. And this financial literacy and financial empowerment.
$51 million is deposited into churches, into banks from churches every Monday. That translates into about $2.5 billion just from black churches alone. And so that's a significant amount of money. And we've got to make sure that we are therefore leveraging those dollars far better than what we're doing now. And I would also say, just for us, all of us individually, we can do so much more collectively than we could ever do individually.
As with most things, you learn more than you teach. And so I've certainly learned a lot here about some things to do when I return home. I believe the church is the hope of the world. And I contend that our future is in the church. I believe there's a way for the church to be viable in this generation. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to talk about this in this city.
I'll say this here, I believe, again, in offering very clear and specific things for folks to do. And one of the things that I often tell pastors when you talk about, folks, when you begin to talk about saving and investing, Ariel Mutual Fund, John Rogers is the founder. Their mutual funds, unlike most, allow any individual to open one for the minimum of $50 a month. You can literally log on right now and open one. I would challenge any pastor to say, if you want to start a process, you literally can tell your members, we're going to, at the end of service, begin to open these accounts. Now you're talking about a black-owned financial company, minimum $50 a month. That begins to start that saving and investing process. And the average person, they have no idea. And when you give it to them, and we had a potluck at TV1, and we were sitting around talking, I was sharing this with several of my colleagues, a couple of those brothers hit me about 2 months later. They said, man, you know, I went and opened an account that night as soon as I got home. They never knew. I think we make the mistake first when we assume folks already know. So we assume they already know about estate planning. We assume they know what chamber exists. We assume they know about this, that, and the other. I don't assume anybody knows. And if I give it to them and then they say, I already know, good, they know, but the person next to you don't know. We have to operate from this point forward where we are stopped being angry and frustrated and complaining about what we don't know and begin to say, no, we're now going to shower folks with so much information that they have no excuse in not knowing, and we're going to follow up again and again and again. That's the only way we change the numbers. And the last thing is this. I don't believe in coming to any event and then folks don't have a challenge. So you must decide right now, matter of fact, go ahead and do this here. You should pull out a sheet of paper, pull out your PDA, and you should write down, and that's not rhetorical, it's literal. You should write down, when I come back to this next year, what is going to be my personal annual report? Did I increase my chamber membership by 20 or 30 members? Did I increase the number of people who signed up? Did we have 200 folks who were out of debt, and then next year I want the number to be 300? You should come back to this conference next year and present your own praise report or annual report to say, I was here last year, I heard this, I'm here to report, this is what we did in the past 364 days. Because if we don't do that, then all we have is lots of rhetoric, and then we don't actually have results. And that should be the challenge for every person sitting. There should be one thing you come back to this conference next year to be able to report how you changed or what changed in your respective area. And then you can look back and say, oh, we did this. I accomplished what I was set out to do. Now here's my new goal for the following year. Ron?
First off, I remember being at church on a Sunday, and as Bishop Thomas said, I was an usher. So what that meant is I knew everybody that walked into church, where they sat, pretty much how much money they were going to give, what they did for a living. I remember one Sunday Bishop Thomas said, all of the people that own a business or want to be in business, stand up. And that particular Sunday, we had about 3,000 members in the congregation, and I said to myself, wow. Look at this opportunity as a chamber leader, and immediately went to work to say that the church historically has been the center of communication. It's been the center of a movement that we have always had, but as new people, a lot of us, and we had a conversation amongst ourselves, young people ain't going to church anymore. They feel like, as one of our members said, they're either done or none. I'm done with that, or I don't want none of that. As chamber leaders, and as Christians, and as Muslims, and as Baptists, and as atheists even, we understand the power of the dollar. And a lot of it is going into our churches on Sunday morning, and it's leaving our communities on Mondays. We have to do a couple of things. We have to hold our church leaders accountable for those dollars, and we have to hold ourselves as chamber leaders to make sure that we know what they do, who their members are, and how we can support their congregation so in turn they can support us. Secondly, he talked about Errol Investments. Friday night we're going to honor John Rogers, President and CEO of Errol Investments, because of not only what he does as the CEO, but what he has done for not just the communities of Chicago where he lives, but across the country. Third, we talked about surveys, and I love Roland, because every time he gets up, he challenges us to do one more thing. And so this year, at the end of the conference, you'll get a survey, and in that survey, there will be things that we will ask you to fill out. And part of that is your accountability to yourselves and to your chambers. We did it 5 years ago, and we're going to report to you tomorrow what we have done. Not only for the U.S. Black Chamber, but for our chambers across the country. And lastly, make it a little light, we're going to have a little party tonight. Across the street, I know some of my church congregation may not be there, but for the rest of us,
don't eat front, they party too, don't eat front. Church folks are the hardest party people out there, go ahead.
Across the street at a black-owned establishment called Bar 7, our young entrepreneurs and young adults will be gathering, be sponsored by one of our corporate partners, Miller Coors. And as we have continued the dialogue the rest of the evening, we ask you to join us. This is an important conversation to me, and every chance I get, I talk about things that we all talk about amongst ourselves at home. What are our churches doing? How can we get more involved in our church community? We hear a lot about the mega churches and all the money that these pastors are creating, and talking about buying jets and planes and suits and Rolexes. We've got to make sure that we're giving them options. We're holding them accountable, and that we're doing our part to make sure that we're giving them options as well as resources. Thank you again for staying through the rest of the day, and let's also give them another round of applause for being here, making themselves accountable, and telling us things that church is doing across the country.
I just realized that's a cute little cap of tie you got on. You ain't an alpha, but that's all right.